Hello, everyone. This is Mickey Eisenberg, and welcome to the Resuscitation Academy Vodcast. I'm pleased with us to have Chief Brian Howard from the King County Sheriff's Department. I've known Chief for quite a while, and he was one of the early founders of police defibrillation programs in the country. And that's a topic we'll be talking about. He's going to tell us about police defibrillation, how it began in the Sheriff's Department, and talk about some tips and wisdom that he can share with you if you think that you would like to explore it in your own community. So, Brian, thank you so much for joining us. We know each other well enough, if I may call you by your first name. So Brian, tell me about the journey you had. How did you hear about this thing called police defibrillation, and how did you make it happen in your department?
Well, we started a small program in 2012, so that's almost 10 years ago. And it was after, as you're well aware, Doc, a pilot project that occurred with some smaller cities in the area. And based off of some conversations we had with you and others at King County EMS, we were asked to participate in a defibrillation program at the Sheriff's Office. Our agency is pretty big. We have 1,200 employees, 750 of which are commissioned. And to make it even more complicated, we provide police services not only to unincorporated areas of King County, but 13 cities and 3 transit agencies. And so it was going to be challenging to try to roll out a program and be thoughtful about that. But we were able to introduce the first 50 defibrillators in 2012 to various areas of the department.
Did you have a tough time selling this to the chief?
No, actually, our sheriff had been the police chief at one of the pilot agencies. And so he was already familiar with the benefits, and they had seen a dramatic save early on. And so when the sheriff was approached, he was very supportive of it and just basically said, make it happen.
Did you get any pushback from the rank and file, the officers saying, hey, we didn't sign up to do this. This is not in our job description. What are you telling me to do? I don't want to do it, et cetera, et cetera.
I would say that I was anticipating a little bit, and you have to go back. This was just after a pretty good recession in the area, and we had, for the first time in recent memory, laid off officers due to budget cuts. And so I was concerned that there might be pushback, that we would be asking our officers to do more at a time when we had severely cut our budget. I was pleasantly surprised, though. The response was very supportive. And I think part of that is, well, we took an approach where we asked for volunteers rather than imposed it on people. And so we had some early adopters that were very supportive of it. And then the others that maybe would have been on the fence could see the benefits of it and ended up also enrolling into the program.
So this is part of their operating procedures now. They're all trained in the use of the defibrillator. And was that a difficult task to bring about?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. If there was any difficulty, it was just in the management of the program. We have 750 police officers that work the streets, and eventually, but it took us a while, we now have a defibrillator in every single marked car serving the various communities throughout King County. Widespread support in the agency. I think there was maybe some questions from our local fire colleagues when they saw us responding to defibrillation calls. But even they were quickly won over and saw the value in our participation. And, you know, when we rolled out the training, we made it clear this wasn't a competition to see who could get there first, but it was a partnership. And we talked with our officers about, you know, if you're second there or third there, you can still go in, you can move furniture, you can help the fire department, you know, gain access to the patient. Just because you couldn't use your defibrillator doesn't mean you couldn't make a difference.
Yeah, I like that term you use, partnership, that it is just one extensive system, and that law enforcement has a huge role to play in getting that first shot in as quickly as humanly possible. So that's great that it was so well received. You had some early successes, as I recall, that really helped sell the program.
Yeah, we did. It only took a minute or two before we started making a difference and having some really good results. And I would say that one of the unintended consequences of the program wasn't that we were necessarily defibrillating people, but we had our officers responding to overdose calls and other medical emergencies and using their first aid training to truly make a difference in the outcome of those patients who weren't suffering from cardiac arrest. But they felt like they had more of a role in that, whereas prior to having defibrillators, they weren't necessarily responding to medical emergencies. The other thing I'd mention, Doc, is I recognized early on that this was also an employee wellness issue, and that with an aging workforce, that there was an opportunity to have these defibrillators be for one another. And so we placed AEDs in each of the work sites. We placed AEDs at our dispatch center. And sure enough, a few years into the program, we did have one of our deputies suffer cardiac arrest while struggling to subdue a DWI suspect. And his partners were able to use their AED and shock him, and he recovered fully and is alive today because of that program.
I remember that situation well. That was one of the most amazing saves that we've ever had since the program began. To save a fellow police officer, wow, that was just mind-boggling that it happened. Who do you think should be approached first? In other words, let's say members of the audience listening to this podcast, I mean, obviously there's a wide variety of communities involved, but what kind of scenario or roadmap would you give to try to sell this into the power brokers in that community?
I think that the chief officers of any law enforcement agency wouldn't find it very difficult to get a commitment from their elected officials to support a program. I haven't heard of very often where council members or county executives or mayors wouldn't support an important program like a defibrillation program. And once you get the financial commitment, because these programs are not free, they're not cheap, but once you get the financial commitment, I can promise you that the people will be there and ready to do the work at a moment's notice. We all signed up to make a difference, and some days we make a difference by arresting a domestic violence suspect, and other days now we're able to defibrillate a patient that's in cardiac arrest.
Well, any final words of wisdom, any kind of tips or tricks that may be of benefit? How would you advise motivated people who want to make it happen in their community?
I think there's some really good civic organizations out there that would be interested in partnering with agencies. You know, you think of your Rotary and your Kiwanis and those types of groups. I see an opportunity where if funding is a challenge for a jurisdiction, they could maybe get those organizations to step up and sponsor a defibrillator for a police car or two. And even maybe be given credit with a sticker on the windshield, you know, AED provided by the Kiwanis or whatnot. I think there's ways around the funding. The funding is, the expense of the program is not too terribly daunting. Once you purchase the unit, then you're just having to purchase the occasional battery or pad cartridge replacement. So our ongoing costs are not very excessive at all.
Was there any anxiety? I know the defibrillator you use does not have a voice recording on it, but was there any anxiety expressed that they're going to be recording us during the resuscitation?
Yeah, so there were questions about that, and most of our officers were satisfied to hear that there wasn't an audio recording. But we did also let them know that because the medics often carry a more extensive defibrillator that does record, that they have to be careful of what they're saying. And they already know that anyway. We're in somebody's residence. We always act professional. And so I don't think that was a huge issue for them.
Okay. Wonderful. Brian, any final words? This has been extremely informative. Any final thoughts or words?
I think the other thing that I would encourage agencies to do is be sure to include their dispatch centers in the planned rollout. We had to change our protocol, and prompt dispatch is really critical to make these programs effective. And so don't ignore your dispatch center. They have to be a partner in this when you establish a program.
Wonderful. Well, you really have been a mover and shaker in this. I really have to say, given the journey you've had on police defibrillation, you were there at the beginning and you have seen it through, and I just can't thank you enough for the good work you've done. So thank you, Chief. Okay, we will bid you adieu. Thanks very much, Brian.